All right, well, good evening. My name is Val Walters. I'm the Executive Director of the Ryan Bartel Foundation. I'd like to welcome you to one of our monthly parent panel discussions. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the correlation between ADHD and self-harm. In recent Virginia Department of Studies surveys and results from hospitalizations, we know that within the state, the number of self-harm numbers are increasing. Actually almost doubled than what they had been pre-pandemic. And there is a correlation between ADHD, self-harm, and suicide. As the Ryan Bartel Foundation is a nonprofit that's focused on preventing youth suicide, we do that through upstream programs with teens, but we also try to share resources with parents. This is our proverbial water cooler discussion so that parents can get resources and feel that they're empowered to take on their children's mental wellness journey. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Denisha Hamilton. Denisha is on the board of the Ryan Bartel Foundation, and she's also head of our mental health advisory board. So this time I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Denisha to moderate tonight's session. Thanks, Denisha.
Thank you, Val. So as Val said, I am Denisha Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker focusing on the treatment of anxiety, depression, and all things teens with teens and young adults. I am on the board of directors, as Val spoke to, because I love working with teens. I love educating the community. I love working with parents. And so this is a topic that is near and dear to all of our hearts. So I want to introduce our other two speakers for the evening. I will start with you, Cam.
Sure. So I am, is this on? So I am Dr. Cameron Caswell, and I'm an adolescent psychologist. And like Denisha, I have a passion for working with teenagers and young adults. I have just learned that they are, to my opinion, the most misunderstood age group on the planet. And so when we start understanding our kids and we start learning their perspective and really understanding and being empathetic, everything changes. And so I work with parents to help them understand their kids and open those lines of communication, because so much of the conflict is due. I told you my cat would jump on the second we started. Did I not? She knows. This is Dorothy, my therapy cat. And so I work with parents to help them open those lines of communication and understanding. And I also do the same with teens, where I help them understand their parents, because they misunderstand their parents' intentions as well. And a lot of the attitude and behaviors that we get are actually in response to how they think they're being treated. And so it becomes this vicious cycle. So I love doing what I do. I love joining Ryan Bartel. This foundation is phenomenal, and I've really enjoyed working with everyone here. And I'm happy to be back and talking about this really important topic.
And we're always happy to have you back, Dr. Cam. So we have a first timer with us tonight. So Bree, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bree Bass. I am a supervisee of social work, and I'm currently working in Williamsburg in outpatient therapy. So my main population as well is children. I love working with the kids. It's definitely been the focus of my clinical work as well. And over the past few years since grad school, I've been able to really focus in the ADHD population as well, which has been a really great experience. I spent some time doing ADHD assessments at a clinic, and that's just a really great experience to be able to help individuals understand more about how their brain works and to give them a reason and give them resources to better work with that. And so now I'm working in the therapeutic setting where I'm still doing diagnosing, but I'm also focusing more on just kind of helping kids and their parents work with the tools that they have to better manage their ADHD. And I've really been enjoying working with that population.
Teenagers definitely keep us on our toes, but they are fun. Once we get past the angstiness, they are fun. As Val spoke to earlier, please, if you have any questions, any specific comments, by all means, please put it in the chat and you can share it with everyone, or you can send those comments directly to Val. But we love the interaction between the parents. And we also want to make sure that we're talking to things that are important for you all to hear. So by all means, use that chat feature. So while I was preparing for tonight's parent panel, I came across an article from the National Institute of Health that says that ADHD symptoms are associated with an increased risk of non-suicidal self-injury in adolescents. Studies have shown that girls, particularly with a history of ADHD, have a significantly high rate of self-harm and suicide attempts. Tonight, we will hear from a panel of experts about the association between ADHD and self-harm behaviors and what parents can do to help their teens. So the first question I have for our panelists tonight is, why do kids self-harm? Dr. Cam, I'll let you kick us off.
I'm keep going, finding my mute button. So kids end up turning to self-harm because in the moment, that is the one thing they can think of to make the inner pain go away. It's either the inner pain or they feel so numb and they just feel so kind of shut off from everything that makes them feel something. So it's really to make them feel something, either something that feels stronger than what they're feeling inside or just feel something at all. And when they do that, it isn't to harm their life, harm themselves. It's really just to stop whatever it is that they're feeling. I think one of the things that, and we'll probably already talk about this, but I want to bring up right from the start, is that a lot of times it's viewed as a call for help or attention. I'm going to say it is a call for help. It's not a call for attention, because a lot of kids will hide it. There's a lot of shame with it. There's embarrassment with it. But kids will sneak it and do it because it feels good, and it becomes kind of addictive because they start going, that's the one thing that makes me feel better, and they start craving. And so once they start, it's really difficult to stop.
Bree, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I'm really glad you highlighted the fact that I think it does often have the stigma of it's an attention-seeking behavior. And noting the difference between a cry for help and attention seeking is so important because, right, it is a call for help, but a lot of times it is hidden, and that's because there is this sense of shame and fear with it. And so I think that's why it's really important when we're identifying that, the kids we work with, the kids in our family, our peers are self-harming, that we respond with compassion and understanding to help them find those resources. I think that with the ADHD population we're talking about specifically, those triggers can be super increased. So I think that lack of understanding for the ADHD brain in itself can be a huge trigger, because a lot of times in our schools and even in our homes, we often have the wrong misconceptions of, why our behavior is exhibiting itself the way it is. And instead of, understanding that it's a different wired brain and we're having challenges kind of with time management or organization or even just emotional regulation, it can be interpreted and blamed in different, more negative ways. And so I think that leads to a lot of self-criticism, and that self-criticism can often lead to the self-harm.
I love what both of you said, and we have a question in the chat, which I think is fantastic. I think sometimes, and I will go ahead and apologize for this, I think sometimes when you put a group of mental health professionals together, we start talking as if everyone knows exactly what we're talking about. So I think the question of what is self-harm is a fantastic question. So thank you, SMT, for asking that. I do also want to highlight, before we go into that, I want to highlight, because I get this a lot from parents, that self-harm and suicidal ideation do not necessarily correlate. So if your child is harming themselves in any way, it does not mean that they want to die. But unfortunately, we were talking about teenagers who are impulsive, who don't necessarily practice great self-care. And so making sure that they aren't doing something impulsively that can lead to suicidal behaviors or actions is really important. So let's take a step back, ladies, and let's talk about what is self-harm. How do we define that?
So some of the common examples of self-harm, we hear cutting, right? Where they will take something like a blade and they'll cut either their arms, their legs, anything where, can hurt the surface and can scar up. Burning, they will do that. Even just anything that is causing more severe pain. So something like nail biting, chewing, any of those other things that aren't causing severe damage, they're definitely signs of anxiety or nervousness, even just, right? So they are signs of nervousness, but the self-harm, we're going to see actual scars and damage done. Breanne, do you have any other explanations or descriptions of that? Those are the ones I most commonly see.
Yeah, same. I think that, sometimes it can get a little jumbled with self-harm and self-sabotage, because we do see a lot of like self-sabotage behavior in our teens as well. Just simply not taking care of ourselves. But self-harm, it does typically connect to what we see the most is cutting and burning. And then not to be repetitive, but absolutely what Denisha said is important. It isn't the same as suicide. It's not the same as having those thoughts. But it is important to note that if we're in this place of causing self-harm to ourselves, that there is a need there that needs to be addressed.
So my experience with self-harm is that there is some physical something that is happening to you. So my clients, I had one client that used to punch herself like with a dumbbell, so it would leave bruising, taking really hot showers so that there's like a little bit of burning or scalding on the skin. So anything that is visible. Now, if your child is biting their nails to the point where their fingers are bleeding, then that could be a self-harm behavior for your child specifically. But we will say this throughout the presentation tonight. If you ever have any questions about your child's behavior, feel free to reach out to a professional. The same way that we would take our child to a doctor if they had an earache or if they were scratching at their ear and we weren't sure if they had an earache, it is always okay to reach out to someone and just say, hey, I'm a little concerned about this. Should I be concerned? My next question, Bree, you started to talk about some of the ADHD specific triggers for self-harm, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that since we are talking about that combination today. So can you go into that a little bit more about ADHD and self-harm?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the two biggest things that would come to my mind would be first, the correlation with ADHD and other mental health diagnoses. Anxiety and depression are the most common ones. So very often when we have a kid with ADHD, they also deal with anxiety and or depression. And a lot of times those are stemming from the ADHD because it can cause a lot of anxiety with struggles to keep up with maybe academic performance, parental expectations. And then also there's a regulation aspect to ADHD. And so we often see that depression as well. And that depression also can stem from the anxiety. So all of that being said, those are in of themselves, triggers for the self-harm. Another really big aspect is impulsivity. So especially with the hyperactive aspect of ADHD that we'll see in most individuals, there is that element of impulsivity. And so when we're in a situation where our emotions are really high, combined with maybe the lack of coping skills, the lack of communication, or even maybe the needed resources, the need to respond to those emotions is going to be really strong. And we're going to do the quickest thing that we can kind of think of, or the thing that's most accessible, the things that maybe we're hearing about on social media. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that does lead to the self-harm. So those are two of the really big components, I would say, is the other connection to other mental health diagnoses, and then the lack of the buildup of tools and support to kind of defer that impulsivity and to use better skills.
I'm going to say the impulsivity is a big piece of that. And even with kids that don't have ADHD, self-harm is often an impulsive reaction. When I talk to kids that have done that and I, ask what was going on, what were you thinking? They're like, I don't know. They're like, I don't even, all of a sudden I was doing it. Like, I don't even know, or they were trying not to, and they just couldn't anymore. It's a very compulsive feeling. And so when you add on top of that, even more difficulty regulating, right, and inhibiting our actions, that's when it makes it even harder for them to resist that. So I just want to put it is that type of response for a lot of kids.
I will say with the clients that I work with, a lot of times, majority of the time, this really is a last ditch effort. They have tried everything else and they are trying so hard to focus their brain on something different. So Dr. Cam spoke to this a little earlier, that my experience has been that clients, when they are self-harming, it really is focusing on a physical pain because they just cannot handle the emotional pain. They're drowning in their emotions, and it gives them something else. Like, well, now I don't have to think about how my heart hurts because I can think about how my leg hurts. I don't have to think about what's happening in my head because I can look at my arm. And sometimes, most of my clients do not want to cut. Like Cam said, they are embarrassed. They have tried other things. They're walking around. They're using other coping skills. So I think it's just really important to recognize that your children, if they are self-harming, this isn't something they want to do. There is a compulsive nature to it. There is it's a quick fix. Unfortunately, it's a quick, I've diverted my brain and my attention to something else. Bree, you brought up the role of social media, and I definitely want to make sure that we talk a little bit about peer influence, because I think that's very big, especially in our middle school years, where that's typically where I see a lot of those self-harm behaviors starting. And so as a parent, should we be concerned about the role of social media and friends? And how do we know if our child is hanging out with someone who may be engaging in self-harm and sort of planting that seed with our child?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such an important topic. I think that, as adults, we all know that the really rough, the really dangerous topics, the hard aspects of life, we're going to come across them. But with social media, we are exposed to them at a much younger age, typically. And so I do try to have really candid conversations with my parents about having those candid conversations with their kids. Even with the most restrictive things we can do for technology, it's a huge part of our life. We're using it for school. We're using it to communicate with our peers. And there's a lot of danger there. I see it a lot with my kids. They're being exposed to a whole different population of people than they're exposed to at school. So you've got the real life social influences from their classmates, but then there's this whole other world that they can access on their phone. And just to be quite frank, there's a lot of really dangerous stuff where people will teach younger kids how to self-harm. They'll plant those ideas in their heads or feed them if they're already there. They'll make it look like trendy and popular. And also, like, one of the biggest dangers is it just normalizes it and it makes it seem like it's not very dangerous. And it also just kind of instills this idea in kids that self-harm is okay, that hurting ourselves is okay, which takes away the respect from ourselves. So I always, encourage my parents to do what they can in regards to setting good boundaries with technology, doing parental controls, especially when they're younger and they're in middle school. But there's so much you can't filter out. So having those really candid conversations is so important. Making sure your kids feel like they're not going to be in trouble to kind of talk about stuff that they've seen or stuff that they've heard. Because the reality is we can't get away from it. It's what we do when we're exposed to it, how we respond next time, and how we can do our best to, you know, kind of filter out what we're being exposed to.
I would love to just build off of what Bree was saying, because I think it's really important to realize that this isn't something we can just take their phones away and say they're not going to self-harm. We also can't say, oh, they're self-harming because they saw it on the phone and they're trying to copy. And I hear this from parents about a lot of things. Oh, they're just trying to do, you know, it's a phase. They're just trying to do it. And they kind of brush it off a little bit as that, or just, I'm going to take your phone away until you stop, because clearly you're not learning from the good things from the phone. I want to really warn people against this, because we're still not addressing the issue. There's kids that see it and try it and don't like it, and they don't do it because they don't need it. There's kids that don't see it and do it because they find it themselves, right? So if we see our kids doing it, I want to make sure we take it seriously and we don't write it off as, oh, it's something they saw. That's kind of in the same line of, oh, they're trying to get attention. And my theory with that is, even if you are 99.99% sure they're doing it for attention, that 0.01% chance that they're not is worth making sure you're serious about it. And also, if they're going to that extent to get attention, then man, they need attention. So let's give it to them, right? So I really want to kind of rethink what we mean by, are they trying to get my attention? Yes, they are. That's they need to. Why do they need to? We don't want them to go to such extreme to get it, right? So I just really want to plant what our mindset is with it, is we've got to take it seriously. With that said, we need, and Bree and Denisha, you were both talking about this. I want to go a little bit deeper into this too, is how we respond is extremely important. If we lose it and we make it a lot, sometimes we make it about us. Oh my gosh, how could you do this to me? Or, oh my gosh, what a terrible parent I must be. Or it's not about us. It's about them. And we need to be there for them because they're going through something painful. And so we have to be able to say, I'm screaming in my head. That's okay. Of course we are. That's a terrifying thing to see. We never want to see that from our kids. But when we see it, what they need is for us to be calm for them. We need to listen to what their pain is and validate that pain, because we can't just say, hey, it's not that bad, or hey, cutting is not going to help it. Because right now, that's the only thing they've been able to find that does help it. And like Denisha said, they've already tried everything else. And if we just say, stop doing that, we're not finding something else that works instead. And we've got to understand, we've got to find something else until we can address what that pain is. They're going to keep doing it. So we need to be calm. We need to validate what they're feeling and realize that what they're feeling, even if it seems silly to us, is really painful to them. And we got to validate the fact that they've tried everything and this is the only thing that has worked so far. We got to start there. Denisha, I'll give it back to you.
No, that you took the words right out of my mouth, Dr. Cam. I was going to say, I think our next.
I usually do, Denisha.
We've done a lot of these together. But I think it's so important to approach your child in a calm manner. And if that means that you go take a self-time out before you come and have that conversation, please do that. One of the craziest things that I say to parents, and I will acknowledge, I say a lot of crazy things to parents, but when they bring me their kid that is practicing any sort of self-harm, I will say to them, my first question to your kid is, do you want to stop this behavior? Because we oftentimes as adults, we just assume it's bad, they want to stop. And I cannot tell you how often I will have to say to a parent, I can't help them stop this until, one, they want to stop it, but also until I replace it with something else. So I've got to figure out what that replacement is. But it's having that calm conversation of like, what's going on and how do I help? And like Dr. Cam said, it's not making it about you. It's not assuming that they want to die. I cannot begin to say that too many times. It is also not doing a full body search, because way too often I hear of parents that are just like, well, now I need to check you in the shower, and I need you to turn around, roll up your sleeves, pull down your pants. That's embarrassing. And what we don't want is that this behavior becomes embarrassing. We do want them to know that it is concerning, and we're going to do what we can to help them with this concerning behavior. But we also don't want to just see them in this one very dark light.
So one thing I want to just add to that, Denisha, too, because that was so powerful. And I think what you said about the, not wanting to die. One of the things I've noticed with a lot of these kids is the actual act of self-harm is wanting to feel alive, not to die, but to feel alive, to feel something. And so there's actually some hope in that, and we can start there. And you're right, a lot of them don't want to quit because they finally found something that feels, and they don't want to give it up because there's nothing else that does it. So you're absolutely right. We've got to say, let's figure out what else we could do that helps you feel alive. But think of it that way.
So I'm going to put on my parent hat, and let's say we have a 13-year-old, and we know that 13-year-olds love to lock themselves in rooms and really not interact with us. So how would I even know that my kid is cutting or engaging in any sort of self-harm?
I will say we don't always know, and kids are extremely good at hiding it. Very good. In fact, some of the kids that are self-harming are the ones that look like they've got everything together and they're smiling. Their grades are great. We're not worried about them. And I'm not saying we got to go worry about, but we need to be aware of all of our kids, not just the ones that are hiding in their rooms, right? All kids, we need to be aware of what's going on. One thing you can notice is if they start wearing long sleeve clothes or long pants when it's warm out, they might be hiding something, right? And again, this isn't about, and I've seen this, grabbing their hand and shoving their sleeve up and saying, what have you done? Let me see this. And I've seen parents do that. And that, again, man, we've just shut them down so fast. And you are the last person they're going to want to turn to right now. And we need them to trust you. We need them. So it has to be a slow conversation, right? So we do look for things where they start to hide, right? A lot of times, though, forcing them out, like Denisha was just saying, forcing them out is not going to get them to force them to open up. We've got to meet them where they're at and start understanding where they're at. But noticing big changes is a big thing. But keeping that line of communication open all the time, whether your kids are doing well or not, is really, really essential.
Yeah, and I'll just jump off that. I think it is a really difficult balance to find because it is a big deal from a parental's perspective. And then you also want your kid to know that it's a big deal. It's not a positive thing to do. But if you go too far into that approach of like, this is really bad, this is terrible, you're going to scare them and you're going to tear down that line of communication. You're going to tear down that line of trust. And I believe from experience, that line of trust is more important than 24-hour surveillance, right? Because if they have that 24-hour surveillance and, like Denisha said, those full body scans, then you're not going to have that trust. They're going to hide from you. They're going to keep things secret. It's going to feed into that secrecy, honestly. So we need to make sure that communication is safe for the kids, that they're feeling comfortable. I think that is like the top thing. There are safety precautions you can do, of course, right? Like if my kid is self-harming, you want to have that conversation, see what they're doing, how they're doing it, and do your best to make their environment safe. Maybe depending on the circumstance, letting other people know that would be a healthy part. But, that's a fine line too. We don't want a lot of kids feel really a lack of trust with their parents when they go telling everyone your stuff. That's not what we're doing here, right? You want to keep their keep respect for them as individuals and the things they're going through. But, you know, as the parent, just making sure you're keeping their situations safe. So only sharing what you need to share to make sure they're accounted for. And I think that's the best way to keep that communication intact.
I will also say that I think part of the communication is also being mindful of how you communicate about other people's children. So if you find out that someone at their school or your best friend's child is cutting, we want to be mindful of how we talk about that in front of your children, because they're paying attention to that. And Dr. Cam spoke to earlier how kids misinterpret a lot of what adults are saying to them. And so let's say, for example, if you find out that your best friend, Amy, her daughter is cutting, and you say something like, I can't believe she would do that. Your kid immediately, if they're thinking about self-harm or engaging in self-harm, they're not saying anything to you. But if you approach it with, wow, I just found out that Amy's daughter is self-harming. I'm really concerned about her. I would really hope that if anything were happening with you and that was something that was going on, that we could have an open conversation about that. Those are two very different ways of communicating to your child, because now they know, like, not only does my parent know what self-harm is, but they just opened the door for me. And now I just have to make the decision to walk through it. And they will walk through it. I wanted to also piggyback, because I think this is important, to also note that if you're not your child's person, that is okay. It does not mean that they aren't talking to you because they don't trust you. A lot of times teens are not talking to their parents because they're worried about you. So they don't want you to worry too much about them, even though that's your job as a parent. In their brain, they're somehow putting this burden on you. So if your child won't talk to you, but they will talk to the neighbor, or they'll talk to an aunt, an uncle, or grandparent, just make sure that that person knows, like, hey, I have this concern. If you could figure out how to tease that out of them to see, that would be great. I think sometimes we assume that our teens don't want to talk to us because we're doing something wrong, and maybe we are, but sometimes it's actually an act of caring. And I think we don't give teenagers enough credit for that piece.
I'm gonna second that. I hear that a lot, where kids are not telling parents about what they're feeling, the pain that they're expressing, because they don't want to burden their parents anymore. And they hear and notice everything that's going on in the house. And so we've got a lot of us going through marriage difficulties and job difficulties and financial difficulties. They hear all of that, and they don't want to be another difficulty for you. And so they don't say anything. So it's important that even it's okay to have those difficulties. In fact, we've had conversations here where it's important for your kids to see you struggle. It's really, really important for them to see you struggle, because we have to let them know that it's human and okay to struggle. And if we always have our stuff together in front of them, we're giving them a really bad impression, because then when they struggle, they think, what's wrong with me? So struggling in front of them, we want to do. I think the important part about that is talking about that, talking about how you're addressing it, and talking about how it's okay that I'm going to talk about things with you. I would love for you to talk about things with me, and we can support one another through this. See, look at, I'm really struggling here, and this is what I'm doing to get through it. And I'm going to be okay because I know, and you're going to be okay because I'm here too. And that we go through it together. And now your child doesn't feel, because the other reason they won't tell us is they don't want to disappoint us. They don't want to look weak. They don't want to be like, I'm not the perfect kid that they're telling everyone on Facebook that I am. And so I'm going to hide it from them because I don't want them to know. And so we need to let them know that there's no such thing as them needing to be perfect, that who they are right now, pain and all, cutting and all, we love them and they're okay. And we're going to accept them and we're going to move from here. And that's okay. They need to know that. All right, Denisha, I'm giving you, or Breanne, I'm going to give them back to you.
So are there any warning signs? We talked about the non-suicidal self-harm, but let's talk a little bit about the suicidal self-harm. As a parent, are there any warning signs that would let me know which kind of camp my kid is in? Or should I behave the same way, regardless of if it's non-suicidal or suicidal self-injurious behavior?
I will piggyback just a little bit off what Dr. Cam said earlier. I think a really big thing to be on the lookout for is really big transitions in your kids' behavior, like sudden changes and isolation. I think both of those are two really big warning signs for self-harm, and also if we're dealing with any suicidal thoughts. I think treating both with a level of severity is obviously important, because while they're very different, one can lead to the other. And so kind of connecting it back to the ADHD topic, because impulsivity can be a part of self-harm in general, but especially with ADHD, a lot of times, even if we are engaging in self-harm for no reason beyond self-harm, if we're not trying to hurt ourselves, if we're thinking and acting in an impulsive way, sometimes we can end up making bigger mistakes than we're planning on making. And so that's why I think it's important to treat both with a high sense of urgency, while still, again, finding that balance, because you're doing that with a high sense of urgency, but still treating your kid with understanding and love, knowing that they're okay, they can get through this. You're not judging them, you're not mad at them. And then, yeah, again, sorry, to connecting it back to what Dr. Cam was saying, just being mindful of, like, if there's been like a really sudden change in behavior, I think is a really big warning sign.
I want to also say their words and their actions say a lot. Kids, actually, they may not come straight out and tell you what's going on, but man, in their behaviors, they tell you a lot. And we often misread it as disrespect or anger or all kinds of emotions, when it's really a lot of inner pain, because kids that feel okay don't have to act out like that. So looking at that, I think the other thing, and I want to tie it back to ADHD too, and just I have a child with ADHD, so I'm here with all of you as well. And I know what's really hard with that is, kids that are self-harming are doing it, yes, to hurt, to feel pain. But another reason is a lot of times it's because they don't like themselves, or they're kind of like feel like they're punishing themselves for not being what they're supposed to be. And this comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but ADHD, I think there's a lot of kids that identify as, I'm this ADHD kid, and that's bad. That means something's wrong with me. And I can't focus, and my grades aren't as good, and I've got an IEP, and I need to take medication, and I'm broken. And mom and dad are always saying, calm down. And there's so much that goes with that. And I think we really, again, need to be very aware of the messages we're sending our kids, because yes, we want to help them with that. But yes, I'm stupid and I'm lazy. Yeah, I hear that too, Denisha, so many times. And when I ask them why they describe them that way, they often tell me, because that's what everyone tells me. Whether we say those words specifically or not, and sometimes we do, that's what they're hearing. And they take those so to heart, and they start defining themselves as those things, which means I can't change those things. And those things are bad. So now I'm gonna take it out on myself, because I don't like me, because I'm not good. I'm not what I need to be. And I see this a lot with ADHD kids, because there's so many things that they struggle with, particularly in school. I mean, their brains actually are quite amazing and beautiful and creative and passionate. And there's so many wonderful strengths that specifically come from having ADHD. Unfortunately, the school system highlights all of the things that they struggle with and just brings it to the surface every day. And that's what they experience. So they are fighting against the tide every single day, and it's exhausting, and they feel like it's because something's wrong with them.
I think that what Dr. Pam just said is one of the most important things to be noted about this whole topic, because the ADHD brain is different and it's unique and it is really powerful. But because society and the cultural norm is designed for a brain that maybe isn't ADHD, the kids that we work with, you know, your kids maybe who have ADHD, they're in that system and it doesn't work for them. And so instead of their strengths being highlighted, it's their weaknesses. And that's really hard on your mental and emotional well-being. And, you know, that's kind of why we see this anxiety and we see this depression with ADHD so often. And that's where we can end up doing the self-harm, right? Because it can be a form of punishment beyond just a way to feel something. So I think it is so important to be your child's advocate in all of their environments, right? And know that it's not always laziness and it's not always procrastination or all these things that it gets titled, but they're working in a system that isn't meant for their brain. And it can be a really hard process to find the systems that do work. And it takes a lot of hard work for them and also for the people that are in their support system, because they can't do it alone either. But I think that is so important because they need to be supported.
I did just notice the time, so I do want to pause for a second and see if there are any parent questions, because again, we are here to make sure that you all get the information that you need from tonight's parent panel. If not, we will just keep rattling on for 15 more minutes. I will say I do love every time we have one of these conversations, because even if as a parent, just knowing that there are other parents with these same concerns, not only is validating to you to know that you're not in this alone, but also that your kid isn't quite as weird as you might think they are, or quite as crazy or scary as you might think they are. So it's sometimes nice to know you're not in it by yourself. All right, so
go ahead.
Nope,
Are you going to read Nancy's? I was going to reply to Nancy. Do you want to kick it off and read what her question was?
Sure. If kids are not doing their homework, how do you encourage them without making them feel like they are lazy? I am constantly talking about budgeting and using time more efficiently, but I think she hears lazy.
Nancy, you're absolutely right. She hears lazy, judgment, criticism, and I know that's not what you mean at all. And it is very frustrating. I'm there too, when you're like, why don't they just do it? There's several reasons why kids don't do their homework. I have yet to hear one that is purely being lazy. Majority of them are overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. And so it's one of the things I do with that is I start with like the smallest task, like get your laptop out. Check. Right? Let's just break it down into the tiniest thing. So that's one. If they start, they're going, oh my gosh, the second I start, that means I have to do this for 2 hours. I don't want to do that for 2 hours. Another reason is they don't understand the importance of what they're learning. It's not the homework itself. It's like they don't associate, or they're not able to really like understand how what they're learning has anything to do with them or what they like. And what matters to them. And so it's stupid, right? It's like, why am I doing something that I absolutely hate? For what purpose? And all they know, and I hear this a lot, it's to get good grades, to get into the good college, to get a good job so they can make money. And they're like, well, I don't really need to make more money, or I don't like. We have in our mind as parents, we see a very clear course of direction, right? And we go, we tie today's English assignment directly to their future career. And we go, well, that is so important. They don't see that. There's nothing associated to that. They see, I've got an English assignment and either I do it now, which it's going to suck, or I do it later and it's going to suck. And I'd rather just do it later because I can postpone it sucking. And that's it. Right. So we have to understand, and why I'm saying this is we've got to understand and get in their perspective. What we're asking them to do without complaint and just do it on your own is something that they really do not want to do and don't understand why they have to do it. And their only motivation is to make you happy or avoid getting in trouble or getting their phone taken away. And sometimes that doesn't even matter. It's not worth it even then. It's not intrinsically motivated, right? So we can force them to do it today and they're going to push back again tomorrow because we haven't addressed the problem. So we need to get into the learning and understanding. So is it a skill thing where we need to start helping them break down the homework where they want to do it and they just don't know how to start? Or is it a will? Do they just have no desire to do it? And then we have to start addressing the underlying internal intrinsic motivation, which is a little bit harder, but we got to do it because it can't be about us. She won't accept help. And I think I'm sure. So Nancy, this is another big thing. And we go back, and I'm sorry, Bree, I can be quiet and let you address. I can talk forever. Bree, do you want to address this? I'll just keep going. Let me give it to you.
No, you're fine. Totally fine. She like Dr. Kim was saying, she probably is embarrassed. And I think that's where, it goes back to everything we're saying about like building that relationship of safety and trust and also transparency too, right? Like a lot of times I think it's really easy in parent-kid relationships, adult-kid relationships to kind of not expose that vulnerable side of ourselves to where we don't kind of like share our own struggles. So, meeting them where they're at, letting them know it's okay to struggle. And I think another thing I'll say in regards to what Dr. Kim was saying at the beginning, yes, there's the intrinsic motivation and then there's the overwhelm. I see the overwhelm a lot. We don't know where to start, so we just don't start. And that's very challenging. So giving them little goals and helping them accomplish those goals, it's a serotonin booster. It's that happy chemical. It helps them realize like they can make progress, they can get something accomplished, and it's like building muscles and we build up to bigger things. But another thing is understanding how they learn, because a lot of kids learn different ways, and beyond ADHD, we've got visual learners, we've got auditory learners. Some people learn when they're writing things down. Figuring out what way your child takes in information is super important. Obviously, we don't always have complete control over like our homework assignments, but if we know what it is that helps them learn, we can try to connect that into a routine and a structure for the assignments to build up a little bit of that intrinsic motivation, helping them connect it to things that do connect with their brain or do connect with their interest.
I want to jump in a little bit more to and expand on that with the serotonin. And someone else just wrote, Nancy, you just described pretty much every single teenager I know. So this is not a you thing. This is and I want to point out, it is not a teenager problem either. It again is, we're expecting a lot of these kids, because if every kid's experiencing the same problem, it's not the kids. Let's just say that. Regardless of that.
Can I jump in real quick, Dr. Cam? Because I feel like I have to say this. I'm a big believer in not BSing kids. So I have said to them, the actual schoolwork is not important. No one's ever going to ask you about this history, whatever you're learning.
Absolutely.
Today. You're never going to do this algebra ever again in life. But what is important is that you teach yourself how to push through when you don't want to. And that is a more honest conversation to have with your kids. So if we just make it about this assignment, no, it's not important. All of us in this room, we know it's not important. But that ability to not give up on yourself and to train your brain not to stop because something is hard, that is invaluable information. That is an invaluable skill that we are teaching our kids. And that going around it that way has helped so many kids to on my caseload at least, to complete their work, I also get into the trenches with them. So I don't want to say, you need to budget your time better. I want to sit down with you and I want to show you how we budget time together, because you're saying words that my 12-year-old brain doesn't understand. And so getting into it with them, I sat with my nephew and did math. I don't even know what it integers or something. Why is that a thing? I'm not really sure, but it was awful. And he cried and I was like, dude, I'm about to cry with you because this is death. But we got this. And we sat there for 45 minutes and we did this assignment together. It was powerful to him. It made me want to cry a whole lot because math is terrible, but whatever. But just getting into it with them and just acknowledging like, yes, this is hard, but look, we can figure this out. Like, oh man, I went on 3 different websites. This is hard. It just validates the struggle for them and makes it a little bit easier for them to come to you. Okay, you got 5 minutes, Kim.
No, Denisha, I agree completely where we've got to just validate and say, because if we keep trying to tell them that this is important, they know it's BS, because we know it's a lot of it's not. And I think also what Denisha was saying is you helped your nephew. I help a lot of kids that are not my kid organize their time. My daughter, no. When as soon as it becomes the parent, it's a different dynamic, and it becomes you start owning it. When you try to push your kid and say you have to push through, it's no longer for them. They've got to take ownership. And so we've got to sit with them and give them guidance, but allow them to practice and fail and try a different way and be okay and figure out what's going on. Because the second we own their homework, they have no desire to do it because it's not theirs anymore. And that's a really difficult thing for parents to do, is to let go of that control. But the only way your kids are going to succeed is if you let go of control. So I'm going to end with there.
Val just took the words out of my mouth. Val is putting a survey into the group chat. If you all can take a minute to just complete that, it helps us with grants and helps us to know kind of what parents are looking for and if we're on par or if we need to change course. If you all have any questions, please feel free to email any of us, throw them in the chat. I think that Val will follow up with everyone who registered and provide resources on this topic, because it is an important topic. And if you take nothing else away, just know that you are not failing as a parent. Your kid is a little off because kids are weird and we don't like to acknowledge that, but they're just we're not amazing as teenagers, and it is okay. They're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. Thankfully, most of us are not who we are at 24, the same way that we were at 14. And so just remember that when you are stressing yourself out, when you are pushing your kid to do something, that 14-year-old is not going to grow up and to be, picking up trash on the side of the road because they can't do anything else. I do want for any of our parents.
I just have to laugh at that because most parents are like, their kids don't pick up trash now. Why would they end up picking trash on the side of the road? That would be a step up for them right now.
I will say, as a teenager, I never made my bed. I make my bed every single day as an adult. I don't know why, but once I left my parents' house, I was like, that's actually a really good thing. I'm going to do it. But with your parent, everything becomes an argument at this time. So again, it's not you. It's life. I do want to let everyone know about our parent panel for April. It's scheduled for April 13th. Which is another Thursday from 7:30 to 8:30. And that is on preparing seniors for college and how to find mental health resources for them. So if this was helpful, please tell your friends, please log back in. I will be here again because I really like doing these. So, and the transition to college, I will say, as someone that works with teenagers and college age kids, it's a really rough transition. And I think we don't always have those honest conversations with our teenagers as they're launching off. And so making sure that parents are aware of what resources exist, as well as making sure that your 17, 18-year-old is also aware of those resources, very important. Bree, Cam, if you have any final words. Cam, I know you got something for us. Go ahead, Bree.
Nothing for me. Just, I think we hit it all. I'm glad everyone was able to come though. I think it is a really important topic. So I think it says a lot too that, you know, all of the parents like showed up tonight, right? Just because that's the biggest thing is just being willing to like educate yourself, better understand your kid, better understand how you can support them. So give yourself a pat on the back, go get some ice cream.
Yeah, I feel like I talked quite a bit today, so I don't want to take up any more of my time. I just want to say you guys are not alone. What you guys are experiencing, a lot of people are experiencing, and you're going to get through this. We're all going to get through it together. That's it.
So I apologize, I misspoke. Our parent support group is on the 13th. Our next parent panel for talking about college is on the 20th. So please register, come hang out with us. We're pretty fun on a Thursday night. And thank you all so much for logging in and spending your time with us.